It was a warm spring morning in New York City, where the first signs of summer began to show. The air was fresh, with a subtle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers, signaling the end of winter. On the bustling campus of New York University, students hurried between buildings, their footsteps echoing through the vibrant streets of Greenwich Village. The energy was contagious, as the city's pulse matched the hurried pace of young minds on their way to learn and create their futures. Among the sea of students, Barron Trump walked through the quad with quiet confidence. Though his last name often brought attention, Barron was determined to make a name for himself on his own terms. Today, he wasn't just the son of Donald Trump, he was a student at New York University, ready to face his own challenges. Inside one of the lecture halls, the atmosphere was different. The air was thick with anticipation as students filled the seats of a large historic room. The tall windows let in just enough light to cast a warm glow on the antique wooden desks, creating an aura of intellect and tradition. At the front stood Professor Carter, known for his sharp intellect and challenging questions. His reputation for cutting to the heart of difficult topics was well known. Today, his question was aimed at the very nature of belief, suffering, and faith, a question that would test more than just logic. Barron, sitting at the front, couldn't help but feel that this class would be like no other. Today, we discuss the nature of power and responsibility, he began, his gaze sweeping over the class. How do we ensure that those who wield power are held accountable? We live in a world where those with authority often abuse it, and I want to hear your thoughts. Can power truly be used for the benefit of the greater good, or does it corrupt? The room was silent for a moment, the question heavy in the air. The students, known for their ability to argue and debate, sat still, unsure of where to begin. Barron Trump, sitting in the back row, shifted slightly in his chair. He had been enrolled at New York University for a little over a semester now, and while he was known as a reserved student, his sharp mind had already made an impression. The pressure of his last name weighed on him, but here, among a sea of strangers, he tried to remain unnoticed. Despite his quiet nature, Barron had always been a keen observer, someone who thought deeply before speaking. Power and responsibility were topics he'd thought about more than once, especially given his own family's complex relationship with both. But today, something about the question struck a chord with him. He was torn between the need to speak out and the instinct to stay in the background. As he was lost in his thoughts, Professor Carter's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Trump," he said, his voice like a snap of a whip. Barron's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to be called on. His classmates, who had been scribbling notes or glancing at their phones, turned to look at him. Their gazes were curious, a little expectant. Barron was used to attention, but this was different. This wasn't a camera or the scrutiny of the media. It was a classroom full of minds eager to see what he would say. "Mr. Trump, your thoughts?" Professor Carter's voice broke the silence again, this time more insistent. Barron sat up straighter, his thoughts quickly collecting. He felt the eyes of the room on him, but instead of backing down, he decided to speak from his heart. His voice was steady as he addressed the professor and the class. "I think the problem with power is that it's often treated like a commodity, something that's meant to be hoarded and used for personal gain," Barron began, choosing his words carefully. "But power, when used right, is more than that. It's a tool for change, for lifting others up. The issue isn't power itself, it's the way it's wielded. If you use power to build a wall between yourself and the rest of the world, it isolates you. But if you use it to bring people together, to help them rise, it has the potential to create real change." There was a quiet pause in the room. Barron wasn't sure if his words had landed or if they had fallen flat. His classmates exchanged glances, some nodding, others looking unsure. Professor Carter stood still, his usual stern expression unreadable. Barron felt exposed but also oddly empowered. It was the first time in a long while he had spoken so openly, without the filter of family expectations or public scrutiny. "Interesting," Professor Carter said after a moment, his voice softer now. "You're saying that power should be shared, not hoarded. But how do we ensure that power is used for good? How do we ensure that those who wield it actually do so in a way that benefits others?" Barron thought about it for a moment. This wasn't a simple question. He had seen power used for both good and bad, and he knew the line between the two was thin. The weight of responsibility that came with power was something he had witnessed up close. I think, Barron began, his voice gaining strength, it starts with empathy. If those in power can understand the struggles of those they're supposed to help, they can begin to make decisions that actually improve lives. It's not just about what's best for the person in charge, it's about what's best for everyone. The real test of power is whether you're willing to step down from your pedestal and see the world from someone else's perspective. The class was silent again, but this time it was a thoughtful silence. Professor Carter nodded slowly, as if digesting Barron's words. There was something in his answer that felt raw, real, like Barron wasn't just parroting an answer he had read in a textbook, but was speaking from a place of personal experience. That's a powerful answer, Mr. Trump, Professor Carter said quietly. You've given us all something to think about. The lecture continued, but the tone of the class had shifted. The students were more engaged, their minds working to unravel the layers of Barron's response. Barron, too, felt a shift within himself. He had come to class that day expecting to be just another student, hiding behind his anonymity. But by speaking out, by sharing something deeply personal, he had connected with his classmates in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about intellectual answers, it was about honesty, vulnerability, and real connection. After class, Barron walked through the hallways of NYU, the sounds of the bustling city bleeding through the open windows. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. He could hear the chatter of students discussing the day's lecture, but he wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, processing what had just happened. For the first time in a long while, Barron felt like he wasn't just living in the shadow of his family's name. He was living for himself, with his own thoughts and beliefs. There was power in that realization, a sense of autonomy that had eluded him for most of his life. As he stepped outside onto the vibrant streets of Manhattan, Barron took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He would always be the son of Donald Trump, always in the public eye, always under scrutiny. But in that moment, he felt more like a person than a symbol. He smiled to himself, feeling the weight of his family's legacy settle differently now. He wasn't going to hide from it. He wasn't going to run from it. Barron Trump was ready to make his own mark, in his own way. Barron Trump's response in that philosophy class wasn't just an intellectual challenge, it was deeply personal. It was about faith, suffering, and the lessons we learn from the struggles we face. Barron showed that even in the face of harsh scrutiny and pain, our beliefs and our humanity define us, not our last name. But here's something to think about. Can someone truly break free from the expectations and shadow of their family legacy? Or are they always haunted by it, no matter how hard they try to forge their own path? Is it possible to be fully your own person? Or are we always bound by the stories written before us? Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.